Hi, my name's Joe and welcome to The Beat. Today we'll be interviewing Brittany Severance, a filmmaker and professor here at Worcester State University. We're here with Worcester State University professor and filmmaker Brittany Severance. Hi Brittany, welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe, how are you?
I'm doing great today. For the first question, how did you get your start in film and have you always had an interest in it?
I was really fortunate when I was younger that my parents had a video camera. So I grew up around video cameras and being recorded all the time. And I naturally, over the years, became more interested in using the camera rather than just being recorded on camera. I would say I was about 13 years old when I started playing around with cameras with friends, doing school projects, goofing around, not really taking it very serious, but it was more of a hobby thing to do for fun. It wasn't like an actual career path for me.
And when did you decide to go to school for film?
It's very interesting. So my original focus when I was going to college was actually going to be a music major. So I went in and I auditioned to sing. I was going to be doing music and voice was my focus. And what happened was after going through the audition process and all of the music theory information that they needed, taking the exams, I actually decided that I wanted to be an English major. So I came in to UMass Amherst as an English major. And my first year at school, I actually decided to go to a career fair. And I was really enjoying the English major, but I wanted maybe a minor or something else to add to it. And a friend had convinced me to go to the career fair, and it was there that I was introduced to the film certificacy program that Amherst has. And what that basically allowed me to do was take different classes, film studies, a screenwriting class, video production, and over time I was actually building courses in the certificacy program, so I'm actually certified in film studies, but I decided my junior year that I actually wanted to get into video production more seriously and not just be an English major. So what I did was I begged my way into the one video production class that they had in the communication department, and I was English, so that was sort of a stretch for them. But I was able to get in, and I told the professor at that point in time that I really wanted to go to graduate school for filmmaking. So it wasn't really into about, I would say, my junior year where I really knew I wanted to go into filmmaking.
Have you had any particular themes that you strive towards or use any of your real world experience to kind of influence how you film in your work?
It really depends on the project that I'm working on at that particular moment. I started off with films that were more fantastical in nature. When I was in undergrad, we were making horror films or sort of fantastical situations. One project was called The Resume, in which the student was trying to create their resume for a job, and instead they somehow went down this magical rabbit hole of these wacky adventures dealing with the resume. So they were less serious in nature when I first started. And then over time, I would say I really have gravitated more towards drama or lighthearted movies, although more recently I've also been doing a lot more video art, which is more documentary based in nature, real life perspectives based on sort of a visual impairment and also disability. So my work has shifted over time. I think it depends on my current interests, maybe who I'm collaborating with, because sometimes I work independently, sometimes I work with others on projects. So that topic does tend to vary over time. I would say themes might include relationships, whether it's family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships that change over time. I also have a tendency to work on stuff that's related to domestic spaces, whether that's the story takes place there or a situation happens to be, again, like for example, a mother-daughter relationship. My film Off for the Weekend deals with that dynamic, and so a lot of the story takes place in different homes rather than out about in the world, like at a restaurant or a workplace or anything like that.
where have you been able to feature your work?
So my movies have been at different film festivals over time. I've also screened one film once here on campus, which was really exciting. I'm hoping to do that again soon. But I've been at different film festivals. So I've screened at local film festivals like the Shawnee Film Festival that's here in Massachusetts, and they were great. I've also screened a few places in Rhode Island at the Avalonia Film Festival. At the end of this month, I am screening at the Valkyrie International Film Festival, which is a woman-centered film festival. So you had to be a female director, writer, or cinematographer to even apply to it. And I have 2 films actually screening at that film festival. One is Letter of Truth, which is a narrative film. It's more dramatic in nature. And the other film is actually experimental. So they're very different genres. And I was really excited to get both films in. And they will be screening, I believe it's March 25th in the evening, that Saturday evening. And the film festival is in Amherst, New York. So it's a little bit of a travel to get there. I Googled it, it's about 7 hours, but I'm considering going and sort of making the journey to see all of these other films.
And you said you've been also working on some photography as well. Have you been able to exhibit some of your photography there or some other locations?
So my photography is a little bit different. It has some of the same themes, dealing with domesticity, perspective, and perception, also relationships, and memory. Memory is another big one in this idea of nostalgia and looking back. And I would say that with my photography, I shoot both with film and digital. So I do both, where my filmmaking is mostly digital. Part of it's just the cost of filmmaking and how expensive it is. With photography, there's a little bit more flexibility. And so I've been actively showing my photography, I would say since 2013. So I'm going on a decade now of doing that. I'm mostly self-taught, which is pretty interesting. Partially through being a filmmaker, I got interested in photography when I was in undergraduate, and then did more formal training as I went on. Actually, my master's degree, my MFA from Emerson College, is actually, even though it says film and media art, the media art component was that I started expanding my interest in photography. So not only is it traditional 2-dimensional photography, but I've been making work on 3 dimensions. I have these fabric portraits that I've been making that I actually print on 3 different types of fabric, and I layer them so that they look sort of holographic in nature as you look through them and get that 3-dimensional aspect. So it goes beyond that traditional work. And I've screened, or I should say I've shown my photography in places such as, currently it's at the Worcester Art Museum, so I have work there. I've had work at the Fitchburg Art Museum. I've had work in one of the New Britain, Connecticut art museums. I have had work that just came down in France. There's a body of work that I have. So I've showed at different places. Arts Worcester, I know we had them recently as a guest on the beat here. I've shown work there, and I'm actually thinking of submitting work to their biennial coming up. And so I would say my work is broad-based. Right now I have 2 shows actually that are coming up. One is in New Hampshire called Glad You Asked, and at the Seesaw Art Gallery. And I also have work that is going to be at the Praxis Gallery in Minnesota.
And how do you balance it all? How do you balance teaching and filmmaking and helping others with their stuff?
It is a very difficult task trying to balance filmmaking and photography and teaching. And I've learned over the years, from being a part-time faculty to now a full-time faculty member here at Worcester State, that part of it is really learning how to be regimented and make time for everything and still keep that work-life balance, right? Because you need downtime as well. One of the things that I've realized is when I plan out a semester where I'm teaching 4 courses and running the center here and doing other things, is that in between where we have a lot of assignments that are due, I also make time to do things like pre-production, so planning my next project, or I set aside a weekend to do editing. And then during the winter break and the summer breaks, that's when I do a lot of my creative work. So I do a little bit during the semester, but I mostly focus on teaching. And then during the breaks, I sort of switch gears and put on my filmmaking hat or my photographer frame of mind, and then work on those creative projects then. So I find that balance, and I feel like teaching allows me to do that. If I was working a traditional office job, I don't know if I'd be able to still do everything and do it well.
And I heard you're making a film this summer. One of the faculty here, Herman Servatius, is working on it with you. Can you reveal any details about that? How far along are you in the process?
So right now we are at the pre-production stage in filmmaking, and so what that basically entails for people who aren't familiar with the filmmaking process is we've been developing a script. We've been working on that. It's about a 10-minute film, and then on top of that, we are starting to plan what the film is going to look like. So we're thinking about production design. So color palettes are something we're thinking about. Costume design. We started working on a shot list. So planning out our film, how many days we are going to actually work on the shooting schedule. So we haven't casted yet. We haven't made any final decisions, but we're in that process now where we're going, okay, we're planning on shooting in June. Now we have to figure out how many days we need, what we need for any additional expenditures, figuring out a budget, and getting everything organized so that it will be smooth sailing when we come out of the semester in May and move into the summer.
And what other titles have you kind of worked in besides a filmmaker, when helping others with their movies or photography? What kind of other titles would you say that you've taken on?
So with my own projects, I've been either the writer-director. I actually have co-directed, and I'm co-directing again on this upcoming project. I've done cinematography, and I've also edited. I would say those are the major roles that I do on projects that I'm more at the helm. However, I also do a lot of work on other people's projects. I started off when I was in undergrad, right after I graduated at the age of 21. I worked on $1 million budget film that was being shot out here in Massachusetts, and I was a production assistant on a movie called Bubble Trouble. And the first day, I was so excited and really eyeing the cameras that they asked me, oh, would you like to assist with camera? Would you like to do slate? And I'm like, yes, I would. That's amazing. Of course I would love to do slate. And then from there, I've always really gravitated towards camera when I can. So I've assisted as an assistant camera before. I've also done a lot of assistant director work, so helping keep the movie organized, working on schedules. That seems to be a natural thing for me. I've also done a lot of script supervising, so taking notes, making sure that the actors are consistent with their actions. Any notes about camera or audio that need to be made, I've done that for the editor to then take and work with as they're making the movie in the editing room. I've also done a lot of behind-the-scenes photography recently and video work for my friends, and that's always exciting because I love being able to show behind-the-scenes footage of people doing what they're passionate about, the movie being shot, having the camera rolling, everyone working on blocking with the actors. So I have a lot of fun doing that, and I'd say I've been doing that a lot recently on other people's projects just because it's easier to jump in on that part of the production when I'm teaching than it is being someone like the assistant director or the cinematographer where you have to be there for more of that production process. And unfortunately, although I wish I had more time to do everything, you have to sometimes pick and choose what you can do during the school year versus what you can do when you have time off from teaching.
And one of your newer classes that you're teaching, movie production, you are kind of teaching the importance of every single role and having people that may be more familiar with camera work tackle sound and audio and other things so they can get good at it. Would you recommend that people, even if they have one role in mind, they get to familiarize themselves with all the roles in the production process?
Yes, and you could probably tell by my last answer that I've done a lot of different positions over the years in filmmaking, whether as a student or as a professional. And it's a good idea to learn a little bit about each position because you don't necessarily know what you're going to be doing when you get out of school. And if that's something that you're interested in, it's a good idea to become familiar with each job. However, at some point you do want to start specializing so that you feel comfortable in maybe one or two particular roles. I would say for me, I feel more comfortable, especially on my own projects, dealing with cameras because as a photographer and filmmaker, I do a lot of work with camera, or I'm working more on the organizational side of things when I'm on set, whether it's script supervising or AD work, because I feel like that's where my strengths are. I do not, for example, feel like my strengths are with sound. I know some stuff about sound, but I would not consider myself an expert in sound. So over time, I figured out where I sort of gravitate towards, and I would suggest students do the same thing. Try a little bit of everything, and then you'll find where you feel passionate about that topic, and also you'll feel what comes more naturally to you.
Does your inspiration differ from film from work to work?
Yes, so I feel like depending on who I'm working with and what the topic is about, that changes my perspective. And believe it or not, every single movie that I work on, there's some component of research that actually goes into it. Even if it's a story that's based on a real life experience, I do look into maybe others in real life situations that have had these experiences. I look into the psychology of certain events. For example, I have a film that I'm interested in making in the future that deals with anxiety and someone having an anxiety attack and what that feels like, what the process is for someone going through that type of endeavor with that added level of stress. So there's a lot of research that goes in before you even start writing the scripts and making the films. So for that, I feel like that's really an important part of the process. And when I did my experimental videos based on vision, I was doing a lot of research on artists that had made projects about different perspectives or used the camera in a non-traditional way to display that type of perspective. And so I feel like the research and that evolution of the production process does change the way that I think about films and my process and my themes that are involved with the different movies that I work on.
And I'm sorry, the term is escaping me, but what is that book that filmmakers kind of create and they take inspiration from different works and they put it in this kind of scrapbook?
Yeah, so you're talking about the director's lookbook. Yes, yep. Those are great. What a director's lookbook is essentially, it could be a slideshow, it could be an actual, as you called it, more of like a scrapbook, where it helps you visualize the film. So you might have sample color palettes, you might have movies that you're inspired by, so you put production stills in there from those films to communicate what you want the look and feel of your film to be. So for example, if I'm the director, but I'm looking for a director of photography who I want to work with, I want them to understand the look, the style, the vibe that I'm trying to achieve. I will have images from other films that inspire me, or I'll have sample color palettes, or even photos or pieces of artwork. They don't have to be necessarily movies that show my inspiration, show the style, and help communicate what I'm going for. And so creating a director's lookbook is really helpful to do that because, again, you're trying to build your team and have them all on the same page as you.
Are there any directors or specific movies you've kind of taken inspiration from, or like say the lighting or location-wise that kind of influenced the way that you made your movies?
I think it evolves over time. There's definitely been different films that have inspired me. For experimental films, I would say Maya Deren, Stan Brakhage, some of the classic filmmakers that have worked in that type of cinema when I'm working on video art. But in terms of contemporary filmmakers, I would say one person that, even though my films thematically are very different from this filmmaker, P.T. Anderson has been a huge inspiration to me lately, partially because he's always worked with very interesting cinematography styles. And by doing more research, I've learned that not only is he a director and writer with most of his films, but he's more recently also been doing some of the cinematography and sharing that role with his gaffer, which for me, that's actually something I've been doing more, because he's very familiar with cameras, the way that different lenses look and feel when you're making the movie, and having a signature style. And for me, I feel my photography reinforces my filmmaking. And so I'm also starting to work more in that direction, where I really am understanding what kind of lenses I want to use at different parts of the movie and how that's going to feel for the viewer and change their perspective based on those components. So I would say right now, currently, he's really influencing a lot of my work. And also, I would say Greta Gerwig is influencing a lot of my work. I don't want to not mention at least one female filmmaker as well, of telling things a lot of times from a female perspective, even though not all my movies have been based on a female protagonist. A lot of them are, and a lot of them center around also women issues or issues from a woman's perspective, which is going to be different with this upcoming film because it's actually both a female and male protagonist, which is a little different, but I'm also working with a male director, so we're kind of sharing that perspective.
Yeah, and I should probably bring up the Women's International Film and Art Festival.
Mm-hmm.
That's somewhere where you've been able to show your work, and does it promote, like the name suggests, it probably promotes female directors and showing how important that is.
Yes, so I've screened at a lot of female film festivals. The one I mentioned, the Valkyrie International Film Festival, is a women's film festival. So a lot of times when I've showed at those, you have to at least have one strong woman-led role on the movie, whether it's editor, director, usually it's director or writer, cinematographer, and a lot of my movies do that. My most recent film that I'm currently in post-production for, A Momentary Stop, I co-directed with another female filmmaker. We have a female composer. I've been editing it, and I also shot it, and 2/3 of my team were women, actually. So with the Women's International Film and Arts Festival, that was my first big film festival that I screened at, and it was for my film Leftovers. So I was very excited to be able to screen at that. They had a red carpet event, all of the things that you think about, the Q&As, the big screenings, the whole thing. So that was a really exciting moment for me to have that happen.
And people that are kind of new to the movie business and they're working as gaffers, or I'm sure you yourself when you kind of started probably had a lot of things on the back burner and ideas that they wanted to go make a movie out of. How would you like what advice can you offer them? What would you suggest to them in order to possibly see them make that movie?
I would say to everyone, including students that are working on projects, is just keep making stuff. Okay, don't get discouraged. There are going to be times where you finish a movie, you're really excited about it, and you start applying to places to show your work, whether it's a film festival or a gallery or even a local screening, and you're going to sometimes face rejection, and that's okay. It's most important that you actually make your film, you tell your story, and you learn from it. Every movie, I have learned something from that process. Whether it was about storytelling, or it was about working on set, or it was when I was in the editing phase of things, whether or not things fit together, I had to go back and maybe get a few more shots. I've learned from that, and I've taken that knowledge and then moved on to the next project. So I would say just keep making work. No matter how good it is or how good you think it is, you're going to get better over time. And that's really important. So just one step at a time, one day at a time.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think that's a great way to inspire and to end off our episode of The Beat with. Thank you for taking the time to come on, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Beat.